Today, we're going to walk you through an in-depth process of installing the TOTO Neorest 750H, which is one of TOTO's highest-end units. We're also going to point out a few differences between the installation of the 750H and the 700H. So if you're looking to install a 700H, this video can work for that too. My name is Daniel Johnson. I'm your bidet expert and the owner of manybidets.com, where over the past 8 years, we've sold over 10,000 bidets. Let's go ahead and talk about the basic process of getting the foundation all set up. So we're going to install the hardware that allows us to install the bowl now. First, we need to make sure that we have our positioning set up. And that is done with this mounting template. We just position the mounting template over the flange. And it's got this perforated edge, so we're going to go ahead and try to pop that edge out. So we're pulling this out because our flange is a little bit raised. If your flange was level with the floor, you might not need to pull this out. Instead, you might just use a couple of wax rings and leave this in to get a proper alignment. We're going to go ahead and leave that out. And now we're going to use this to determine where our holes need to be for the mounting brackets. So right here, and then here in the back, there's a little clasp that will hold the manual flush, so we can screw those out as well. Now, we could tape this down. For the sake of my video today, we're going to not tape it down just for the sake of time, but if you wanted to get this perfectly positioned and then tape it down, that is not a bad idea. And now we just need to put our drill bit into the drill and drill out a couple holes. And here I'm just marking the holes so that I know where they go. And now we'll go ahead and drill them out completely. Now that we have these holes drilled out, we can go ahead and install these mounting brackets. And these mounting brackets are going to be positioned so that when the bowl sits down, the mounting brackets are right next to the outside of the bowl. And then what we do is we screw the bowl into these mounting brackets to keep the bowl from moving. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to use a size 3 phillips for this. Now remember, this is what's holding your toilet in position, so you want to make sure that it's snug, but obviously don't over tighten. So those are nice and firm and snug. Now that we've gotten that done, we want to install this flange adapter. So the flange adapter is going to be installed with the hardware that came off of your original flange and toilet. So this particular piece of hardware does not come with the Neorest because it's not needed, because it should already be a part of what came with your original flange. We're going to go and slide this in. You are probably using a wax ring here, or if it's level with the floor and there's a lot of space that you're dealing with, maybe a couple of wax rings. We're using a better than wax seal. The reason for that being that we do a lot of installations on this demo unit, and we don't want to continually gunk up this flange, but you're probably using a wax ring here. The better than wax works as well. If you are using a wax ring, the wax ring should be adhered to this plastic first if you have a metal flange. If you have a plastic flange, it can be connected to the flange first. So keep that in mind as well. Now we just install this on top. And now that we've got the flange adapter on, we're going to go ahead and put on our washers. You may only have one washer on these, very likely. We had to grab a second washer because the original washers we were using were a little too small. So that's a heads up. 2 washers on this are not really normal. And we're just going to tighten this down. So now we've got the flange adapter installed. We want to get it really snug. Don't over tighten it, obviously it's plastic, but you want it snug because this is what's going to create the seal between the flange and the toilet. So you want to make sure that that is snug. So before we install the bowl, I want to talk about these hex head holes in the flange adapter. We get people asking about them. The short answer is that this flange adapter is used for multiple different Neorest installs. And these holes on either side are used for the RH or the AH installation, not the other installations, so you don't need to worry about them. It's also important to note that if this manual flush cord is not shooting out the back of the flange adapter, you have the flange adapter on backwards. So that's one other important thing to note. All right, now let's go ahead and lift the toilet bowl into place. You do have it coming with a cardboard lifting apparatus. This lifting apparatus slides around the bowl, so it would slide around the bowl like this, and is thin enough that it won't pull over the top. Gives you a couple of handles to grab onto. So you can use this if you see it as beneficial. I tend to find in general that there's not normally enough space around the toilet to successfully use one of those. So if you find that being the case, it may or may not be beneficial, but it is there. I'm going to go ahead and lift the toilet bowl into place without that cardboard insert. And I'm actually going to do it, take my wedding ring off here for a second so I don't scratch the bowl. I'm actually going to do it just by grabbing inside the trap here and lifting. These are a little over 100 pounds. Now, this has a little porcelain tube in the bottom that's going to fit on that rubber gasket. So I have to line those up. I'll know when it's lined up because it won't sit high like this, it will actually sit flush. So let's see where we're at. We also want to make sure that that cord is around the back, and it just slid into place on its own. That's perfect. So you can see how it changed from being wobbly to now sturdy. We now have this bowl in place. This cord, you may not be able to see it from that angle, but this cord goes inside of a little upside down U so that it can move freely. And it's actually going to snap right up here. This piece, by the way, is going to face in. So you can see it actually says outside here. And once we get these nubs lined up with the hooks, it should snap in. There we go. So it's snapped in, and then this little ring just tucks under and sits right there. We'll also want to take off this plastic and this tape. And now we need to put screws into either side to mount the toilet to the floor. So we have the 2 mounting brackets here. We're going to put screws through these holes into that mounting bracket. Here are the screws, and you can see that they have a very large hole in the center of the screw. And the reason for that is that after we install them, we use these little white caps, and they basically clip into the end of the screw. This hole allows for space for these caps to do just that. We're going to use a size 3 Phillips again. All right, and then we just put these caps on. So you see how that cap easily hides the screw, giving it a clean finish. And the other side gets that cap as well, and we're good to go. Now you'll notice when I was putting those screws in, the bowl actually moved a little bit to settle into place, but I was very careful not to over tighten those screws. So because these screws are holding the porcelain itself, if you over tighten them, you can cause the porcelain to crack. So I would recommend being careful and not over tightening them. They're really there to keep the bowl from moving side to side. The weight of the bowl is going to do a good job of keeping it on the flange. So over tightening this can cause the porcelain to crack. Be careful about that. They want to be snug, but don't over tighten those because that can be problematic. So now that we've got the toilet bowl installed, we're going to go ahead and install the water inlet. Now, traditionally, you probably have a traditional water inlet already installed here with the quarter turn or the full turn. However, those tend to offer lower water flow than what the TOTO inlet allows, and this is a 1/2 inch. So TOTO highly recommends getting a thread, which is what we have here, installed on the end of your water pipe, and then installing their water supply inlet. It can still be turned on and off using a flathead screwdriver or a crescent wrench, but it has a filter in the water inlet itself, which helps to protect the unit, and it also allows for better water flow than your standard traditional water inlet does. So for both of these reasons, if you want a valid warranty with your TOTO Neorest purchase, you're going to need to use their water inlet. Let's go ahead and install it real quick. Now when installing this, a little bit of plumber's tape is a good idea. So this is just going to install into the wall, but we might want to put some plumber's tape on these threads first. So we're going to go ahead and grab some. Now don't overdo it with the plumber's tape. Now when you do the plumber's tape, you need to make sure you're going in the right direction as well. So right now I'm spinning it this way, so I would actually want to do the plumber's tape like this, so that I'm not peeling it off as I'm screwing it in. And let's go ahead and screw this into the wall real quick. And now we can install the water inlet onto the end of this. Same principle applies. So we're going to screw this on, but we're going to want some plumber's tape on there as well. Decorative cap on there as well. There we go, that's nice and tight. And then last but not least, we can connect this water supply. We'll need to connect this water supply. We're gonna go ahead and put this blue washer in the end here. This technically shouldn't need any plumber's tape because of the washer. Probably wouldn't hurt to have a little bit, but you're going to want it to feel pretty snug, because the more snug it is, the tighter it is going to be against the washer that's in here, so that's always good. So now we have the water supply installed, and again, remember, you can turn the water supply on or off using this end piece here. There's a flat tip here, and then there's the nut that you could use a crescent wrench on. So now we have the bowl portion installed, and we want to install the top portion. Now remember, this is the 750H, so there's a couple of things you're going to notice. First of all, we have this additional hose for the Actylite which we do not have with the 700H. So something special here. We also can notice that the bowl has almost a pearl-like look to it. It's a special glaze that interacts with the Actylite. So those are a couple of things that you'll notice about the 750H that you won't notice with the 700. All right, let's go ahead and put this top on. If we look at the bottom, we can see that there's a large opening. That opening is going to sit right on top of this so that this has somewhere to reside. We're also going to want to take this piece off. This bag actually shows right here how the clasp works. So you can see that as well. There are also rubber guards here. When you install it, you don't want the rubber guards being pushed out like this. You want them pushed back. So if you put it too far forward and then scoot, sometimes you can push them back. So just make sure that those are properly tucked before installing. Make sure we have access to this, this white hose that we talked about a moment ago. And then it should, once we have it all lined up, just snap into place by pushing down. Sometimes these electrical cords, let me put this down for us. Sometimes these electrical cords can get in the way, which is what we're dealing with here. So let's make sure that those are out of the way as well. So now all of those electrical cords are out of the way. And there we go. It is now in place. So now that the TOTO Neorest 750H top is on, we have to connect the supply hoses. We're going to start by connecting this water supply hose that comes from the seat to the bowl portion. You can see if we look at this here that there are a couple of rubber O-rings built into the water inlet. So we just have to get this tight. And as we tighten this, those rubber O-rings will grab the water inlet. And then we can tighten it a little bit further with a wrench, but we don't want to over tighten this because it gets pretty snug all on its own. Now that we've gotten that tightened, we're going to connect the white hoses together. Now these white hoses are not hoses you're going to see with the 700H. So these are specific to the Actylite setup, the 750H. So if you don't see these and you're installing the 700H, don't worry, that's not a big deal. What we're going to do is we're going to push the two hoses together. You can see that this hose has a rubber O-ring on it. So we're going to push these together. That's going to create a seal. And now we're going to take this metal clip and put that metal clip right over the two to hold them together, and then close this plastic piece on top of that to hold it all together. All right, so now those two hoses are connected. Next, we need to connect the electrical connections. You'll notice here that we have a square and a rectangular connection, so we don't have to worry about connecting the incorrect cables to the incorrect inlet. So the inlets and the outlets are both very easily distinguishable and impossible to mix up. Now, as we're going through this process, we want to make sure that the unit is not plugged into power. One common thing that we see happen is the unit gets all booted up, you're ready to go, and then it's not functioning. You realize you didn't connect the inlet and the outlet electrical connections, and you connect them without disconnecting it from power first. That is going to fry your new Neorest, and you're going to need to get a replacement. So do not touch these electrical outlets unless the Neorest itself is not plugged into electricity. So again, these two electrical connections, connect them at this point before they're plugged in so that you don't fry your unit, and then just tuck them back once they're connected. If you've previously had your Neorest plugged in, unplug it, let it sit for a few minutes before connecting those if you forgot to do so. So now that we have all of our connections set up, we're going to take these screws and tighten in this, this top portion to the bowl. Now I like using a manual screwdriver for this, and the reason is that the manual screwdriver is a little bit less aggressive than what you would get with a drill bit in a drill. And these are actually screwing into a top mounting kit design, so a plastic sleeve with a metal nut in it. So if we're using a fast screwdriver and a really powerful screwdriver, we can strip that. So I like using manual screwdrivers for this portion. All right, now that those are tightened, we're going to go ahead and put this top portion on. This is just going to cover up the internals. And it's also going to give us a spot for our battery pack, which we'll talk about here in a minute. This might take a little finagling and positioning in order to get on. But there we have it. And we need to switch out our screwdriver bit here to a smaller bit. And then there's just one screw that we tighten down to keep this in place. That's been done. Excellent. Now, we install the manual flush. So this little black box is the most common question, the most common piece of the puzzle that we get questions about. There's a variety of different things people assume that this does. And despite how complicated the installation is, this is what we get the most questions on. Well, it is just a battery compartment. So we're going to go ahead and put our batteries in. The batteries came with the unit. Close it up, and now it's all set. So we're going to go ahead and put it in its little holder here, and then put the connector piece, the actual piece that allows it to give power to the manual flush, in a holder here. So this is not actually powered, and the idea is that you're not using up battery when you don't need to. When you lose power and you need to set up the manual flush, you just lift up on this little pull string, take the connector, move it over, plug it in, and now you have your manual flush. You might have to pull on this a couple of times for it to fully flush, and because it's on batteries, it's not going to be as powerful as your standard pump assisted flush, but it will get the job done. Once power is restored, move this back to its holder, and then simply tuck this back in, and we're good to go there. Now we're going to take the door, and the door has a couple of hooks on it. We're going to line those hooks up with the pegs. Give it a little push, we'll hear a click, and the door closes. So now we have access to what we need access to, but it's all concealed and hidden for the sake of appearance when we don't need it. Now let's talk about the TOTO Neorest remote. So this remote takes two AA batteries that go in the back and comes with a wall mount that is magnetic. So the remote actually clicks into the wall mount using magnets. The wall mount can be installed using the provided screws, and the screws have anchors if you need them. There are also a couple of small holes in the bottom of the remote holder that line up with small holes in the remote itself. You can mount the remote to the wall holder so that it won't come out of the wall mount. Now, that's great if you have kids that you're afraid will take it out or drop it. However, that gives you less access to the back where you change temperature and a variety of other settings. This back of the remote can be a little bit intimidating. If you're curious about how these options on the back of the remote work, check out our playlist in the video description where we talk about each feature on the back of the TOTO Neorest remote in detail. So now that we've got the TOTO Neorest 750H installed, we can turn the water supply back on. Now technically after we installed this water inlet, we could have turned the water supply back on for the house, but I'm turning it on for our demo unit now. So water supply for the house is now on, and now we have to turn on the water supply at the water inlet to test to make sure that there's no leaks for the actual toilet itself. So leaks here are important to check, and then when we turn this water inlet on, we're going to check the rest for leaks. Now, keep in mind that this is not your standard water inlet, so you're not going to have a knob or anything. Instead, you're going to need to use a flat tip screwdriver to turn the water supply on. We could hear it kick on there. So let's listen. We don't feel any leaks here. And everything is dry up in here as well, so we know we're in good shape. So we're going to go ahead and close this door again. And now we're going to plug the 3-prong plug into a GFCI outlet. So now that we've installed our Neorest, obviously we want to make sure that it works. We can test that using the buttons on the side, or test it using the buttons on the remote. We might also need to let a little bit of water cycle. We can kind of hear that happening now as it's trying to run a pre-mist, a nozzle clean, etc. So it's doing a bit of that. But what a lot of people will do, regardless of if they're testing through the remote or testing through one of these buttons, is press a button and say, the wash isn't working. Why is the wash not working? And what happens is that the Neorest has a seat sensor built into it. So you may or may not be able to hear that click, but there is a weight activated seat sensor here, and if you don't have that activated, the wash isn't going to work. So with it activated, let's go ahead and try one of these wash settings. And now we see the wash working. So all that we had to do to test that is we had to activate the seat sensor by putting weight down on the side where the weight activated seat sensor kicks in, and that allowed us to test it. I release the seat sensor, the nozzle goes back in. And then of course we have our flush button, which works regardless of whether or not you're seated, because it's flushing. Now keep in mind, all of these operations can be done from the remote as well. Just with the setup that we have here, these buttons were easier to use. Hopefully you found today's video helpful. If you did, please consider making your next purchase from minibidets.com. Doing so helps to support us and helps us to continue to be able to create great content like this for you and others. Also, if you found today's video helpful, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you see the additional videos that come out, whether it be videos on the remote, on the operation of the 750H, or a wide array of other bidet related topics. Don't forget to like this video if you like what you saw, and comment on the video if you have questions or suggestions on future videos that we could produce as well. And take a look at the video description as well for contact information, a link to our site, how to reach us via phone, text, or email. Thank you again for watching, and have a fantastic day.
minibidets.com, where we sell mini bidets, not mini bidets.